we are so glad that you're here to join us for this disaster preparedness webinar. On your screen, you can see the beginning of our agenda. What we were thinking we would do is have brief Q&A after each presentation. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask, we'd like to ask you to submit them through the GoToWebinar in either questions or chat, and then Christina and I can let our presenters know what those questions are. So if you're on the conference call line with the 877 number, please mute your phone unless you're speaking, and submit your questions through the GoToWebinar application. So in the room with us here, we have Susan Beckman, who's the Director of the Office of Administrative Solutions, and we also have Daryl Madrid with our Office of Economic Security. On the phone, we have Rick Bankston from El Paso County, who's going to give us a brief overview of their experience in El Paso County with lessons learned and best practices. Steve, have you been able to join us from Fremont County? Well, we also have the pleasure of including Ginny Riley from Larimer County, who will talk about their experience, and Jody Kern with Rio Grande Mineral County. So, Christina, do you have anything to add?
No, we just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us, and we will get going. So, Rick, you are first up if you were ready to go.
Sure. I don't have a PowerPoint, but kind of reviewed the agenda. So, well, let me just kind of preface this by the troubles we've just had. Communication is so important in everything.
Yeah, indeed it is.
Well, I've been with El Paso County 21 years, and when, I'll start with the Waldo Canyon fire, which broke out in June of last year, 2012. So that's 15 months ago. My prior 20 years, we had never experienced anything like this in El Paso County. So it was quite a devastating event. And then a year later, we have even a greater fire, Black Forest. And then this summer, the flooding here in El Paso County, Highway 24, where lives were lost. Manitou Springs has been, hit pretty hard, so we've worked with them as well around recovery. So it's been an incredible 15 months. But really starting with Waldo Canyon, which not only affected the community, we lost 350, 400 homes, less than a mile from our Citizen Service Center where our services are. When that fire came over the Queens Canyon, I think it was June 26th, I actually watched it out my window. I made a call to the county administrator. They were actually doing a daily update with the feds and the mayor and at Coronado High School about 2 miles away. And I think people saw this fire come over. I think everybody was shocked that as much planning as you can do, the weather pattern, the winds, that this fire just came over and came down the hill, actually was within less than a mile of our building. So late that day, we were ordered to evacuate. So it wasn't only just how are we going to serve our clients who were affected by the fire, but now that our building was closed, our services had to relocate. So it just so happened that we were less than a year away from actually moving from our old offices on Bijou and I-25. So county administration identified our 2 buildings over there that were still vacant, hadn't been sold. So we actually moved some of our direct services to 17 North Spruce, is where our public assistance offices were prior to our move. So, we just had to communicate with staff, get them there the next day. County facilities did a great job setting up. And then 3 days later, we created our Disaster Assistance Center at our main Human Services old building. And again, the county within 36 hours had, connections, had the power up, utilities, had workstations in place, phones. Our information technology group worked through the night to get lines set up so that we could be online with the recovery. So in some ways, we had two systems, two paths. We had to also keep our general human services operations running. Some of the good things about that is that we had just invested in iPhones for all our casework and supervisory and management staff. We had been on the path of purchasing notebooks minis for our casework staff and supervisors. So the good thing about child welfare, child protection, those folks could really work from home. They could make calls, they could be checking email, they could be communicating with our community partners. So that was really certainly a best practice in investing in technology. I did want to also acknowledge the intra-county, cooperation. That's certainly a big one as well, in the sense that, facilities, IT, health department, even workforce center, we all came together to reach out to our community partners. So within 36 hours to set up that assistance center, we had 40 partners in that building. We had tables, and we created a phone center, a call-in center, so that people didn't necessarily have to come down, but if they had a need, we could connect them to that service. 211 was a big player in the sense that they actually created a updated book really for services that were really needed just by the community around the fire. So again, thinking outside of human services, we focus on adult child protection and public assistance programs and those types of things. So really thinking outside of, people have pets that needed to be cared for. They clearly wanted to talk to their insurance companies, so we had our parking lot covered with huge vans and mobile vehicles that insurance companies brought in. So again, thinking outside the box a little bit. Some people had significant housing needs. Some people were ready, just, their houses were damaged. They, the health department, regional building, those kinds of things. So really thinking beyond our human services needs was pretty important. State assistance, I also want to comment on that. As an example, Waldo Canyon, D. Martinez called me right away. Things were going pretty well. We had an issue the first weekend of June 30th. We were actually, again, we couldn't even return to our building, and then we had people coming and applying for emergency benefits. So with the, the emergency TANF benefits, where, we get the waiver and, you can actually serve clients up to $75,000 a year. The state was actually ready to do a CBMS rollout that weekend, and CBMS was going to shut down. So I called Dee, and she called the governor's office, and they did postpone that bill so that we could, again, begin serving clients that day. So, some of the things I think we could have done better. I think when the fire came over the hill on June 26th, I think our staff, I don't think we gave them enough time. We probably should have had some more pre-evacuation because traffic on the west side of Colorado Springs was a mess. And we really didn't see the fire come over until after 4 o'clock in the evening, so a lot of people were leaving as well. We had caseworkers already out in the field, so I don't know what of an impact it would have made, but I think it really caught myself and everybody really by surprise that this thing just kind of jumped out at us. But I think the county and the community and the state and all our partners, we've learned here now with the Black Forest. We were able to set up a disaster center here this last summer in our building here at Citizen Service Center. We had our same forms. We changed some of the names, our resource list, but again, we had the same partners who stepped right up and really stepped in, and we had that thing going within a day. And again, you're serving different communities sometimes. I mean, we're oftentimes focused on those in poverty and struggling, and in this case with some of these fires, I mean, you're getting a mix of people who really, our centers just want to come and talk to someone. We have some faith-based counselors and Aspen Point, so we have, professional mental health counselors that I think people are so devastated. I think just having that support system is as important as any of the hard services that we could provide. So I will leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much, Rick. I forgot, and I feel bad about this, I forgot to introduce also our CDHS colleague, Amanda Dyer, who is on the phone with food assistance. Are there any?
Yes, I am on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Hey, thank you.
Christina, do we have any questions that came up?
So we just want to remind our participants that you can ask questions one of two ways. You can either send them in chat, or if you called into the separate conference call line, you can ask those as well. Do we have any questions now for Rick and his lessons learned and his experience in El Paso County?
Rick, this is Susan Beckman, and I'm wondering if you can tell yet about the differences of people with the buyers that had insurance for their houses and those who have significant damage in their houses now, like in Manitou, that don't have insurance. How are you helping them out differently?
Well, I think again, Black Forest, was probably a good example that many people, Mountain Shadows, virtually I think everybody, that's a pretty upscale community, and most of the homes were high-end. Black Forest, there's lots of high-end homes, but there's also people who live there in cabins for decades, maybe near close to a century. There's old homes that have been there, there's septics and the like, so probably a lot of people without insurance. But, Commissioner Darrell Glenn, who represents that district, he has done almost weekly meetings and had other task force groups to work with people in that, in Black Forest. Commissioner Sally Clark, who represents Manitou, they've done similar things in Manitou to support that community, to, connect people with, whether it be FEMA. I don't know the specifics around who had insurance and who didn't, but clearly there's been an effort to connect people with FEMA and to help them in any way they can. I mean, it's just devastating for some folks because they're probably not going to be able to rebuild and the infrastructure that it's going to require with newer building codes. So all I can say is I think, the county has been very aggressive in trying to support those folks.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions for Rick? Hearing none, I will see if...
Has Steve joined us on the phone? Okay. Steve, if you come on, just let us know. If not, we will go on to Ginny Riley with Larimer County.
Yes, Larimer County seems to be somewhat disaster prone. We have a long history of disasters, starting with the Big Thompson flood in 1976, which was before I came here. But I'm just going to cover the ones that happened since I've been here. So we had and I don't know how you change the PowerPoint. Do I just tell you to go to the next page?
Yes, that will work.
Go to the next page, please. Okay, we had, since I've been here in 1997, we had what seemed to be a small disaster, but the Spring Creek flood took out a small trailer park. The water rose more than 5 feet in 3 minutes and continued to rise, and 5 people died, and it was a low-income trailer park, so there were a lot of services needed. Everybody there lost their homes. But the important thing to note, and I'll cover it a little bit more later, is whether a disaster gets FEMA individual assistance, IA designation, because your question for Rick actually comes into that, because if a disaster gets FEMA's individual assistance designation, there are a lot of additional services available to help individuals, including helping people who have uninsured property, and housing assistance, temporary housing assistance, veterans benefits, tax refunds. People can actually redo their taxes for the current year that the disaster happens in and deduct many of their losses from their income tax and potentially get a refund. Unemployment benefits, legal counseling, crisis counseling, and many more services. So we will come later to one that did get that for us, but that one did not. And we had to do a lot of benefits assistance, and the community had to help a lot because it did not receive that designation. In May 2008, we had the Windsor Weld tornado, and actually most of the damage from that tornado was in Weld County. But what we were able to do is, if you look at the date, those are the good old days of TANF reserves. And so we were able to give $1 million out of our reserve to Weld County to help them with disaster assistance for that tornado. What I learned from that is you can't just give your TANF reserves or TANF money to anybody without going through the Colorado Works Allocation Committee. So I ended up getting my hand slapped, but they did approve it. But if you are going to do anything like that, you need to make sure you go through that process of approval before you can give them money. And then June 2012, we had the High Park fire. In this one, we had a number, not as many as El Paso, but a great number of homes destroyed, thousands of people evacuated looking for places to stay, and some pretty serious respiratory issues in the urban areas as the smoke came down from the mountain areas. So we were doing a significant amount of outreach to our at-risk health at-risk populations through our single entry point, through child welfare, looking at high risk for health foster care kids and moving them out to somewhere else where there wasn't as much smoke. And this one also received no individual assistance. So there was a lot. We had a disaster assistance center, but we were counted on more in our TANF program to provide some emergency assistance than we have been in the recent flood. In the recent flood, we have major damage to homes. You need to keep going on the PowerPoint. Major damage to homes, transportation systems, road and bridges. And in fact, on one of the first days of the flood, we had to send home everybody who lived south of the Thompson River in Loveland, because they were closing all of the bridges, including the interstate. So we had to essentially evacuate our employees back to their homes, so they weren't going to be able to get home. 2 people died in the Thompson Canyon. Employees' access to home and work was affected from the closures, so many of them couldn't get here. Some of our employees, for the first time, actually had damage from one of our disasters, and this one did get the higher level FEMA designation. Next slide. Our activities, probably similar to El Paso, were emergency benefit issuance and replacement of benefits. A lot of people left their houses without their glasses and their EBT cards. So we had to do quite a bit of replacement. We did burial assistance. We had to go through all of our foster families, our elderly and disabled, and our employees, and determine who was affected and how we could help them. We staffed the Disaster Assistance Center 7 days a week while we were still keeping operations going on site. TANF diversion assistance, I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next slide. And no matter what your name says in front of your table at the Disaster Assistance Center, you need to be prepared that anybody will come to you and start telling their story. And so a lot of information and referral, walking people to the other agencies that were there and making sure they got there, and just listening, a lot of just listening. Next slide. Okay, what we learned, you have to have strong IT support to be able to issue the benefits and cards at whatever location you use. That also comes in handy because if you're at a disaster assistance center, you're going to have busy times and slow times. So our staff was able to actually pick off regular work off of our queue when it wasn't busy from the Disaster Assistance Center, which lessened the impact of having staff there sometimes 8 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is really important that people should do now, is get their county diversion policy. Even if they don't have other offerings in county diversion, get a disaster assistance diversion policy approved by your county and added to your state plan. Have the commissioners approve it and add it to your state plan, even if you don't anticipate a disaster. Because we learned that one in the High Park fire, because it allows you to use TANF funds up to the 75%, $75,000, to provide assistance that is out of the box of your normal diversion assistance if you have that program. And we were glad when we had the flood that we still had it from the High Park fire, because you can't, until you have that added, actually use your TANF diversion program to actually pay for people to replace their work tools that they didn't have, for any kind of emergency assistance. We also learned that if the governor declares it a disaster, you can get an executive order, and we have the state get this for us, that allows us to be flexible on citizenship and identity. Many people lost their identity documentation in the fire, and we were able to be flexible on that. So it's important to know if that happens. Now, if you get an individual assistance FEMA designation, the state also can get you access to the FEMA database through Homeland Security. And why that becomes important is if you have that level of a disaster food assistance, which is a completely different thing and has a different application, opens up for people who at higher incomes or who have disaster losses to get 1 month of food assistance. But you have to confirm that they lived, worked, or owned a business in the flood area or the disaster area. And since everyone who wants disaster assistance has to sign up through FEMA, you can have access to whether they are actually eligible then for disaster food assistance. Track everything from day one, money and time, because in some cases you can get your expenses reimbursed through FEMA. And you don't know until it's over what is reimbursable, so you do have to track everything. Next slide, please. Take care of your staff who are at the Disaster Assistance Center, physically and emotionally, and have other work that they can do when it's slow, as I said. But it is very draining on staff to hear the stories every day, all day. They are emotionally exhausted, and making sure you're rotating people in, making sure you're giving them a break from it is really important. Getting information and doing rumor control. I can't tell you the rumors we heard out at the Disaster Assistance Center, and making sure that you're linked in to your county's disaster assistance staff, if you're large enough, or the sheriff or whoever is actually able to give accurate information. Get some community funding for gift cards. Well, we had gift cards in Hyde Park Fire donated from a church. And you would not believe how sometimes you're going to hit people you can't help right there. You're going to have verifications or something like that, and they are in need. And to be able to give them gift cards is really significant for them and how your staff feel about actually being able to help. Now, you're going to get a lot of calls from the state when you have a disaster and asking what they can do to help. And I got that call from one of the state department directors, and I said, you know what? CBMS is going to be down on weekends for the next 2 weekends for the build. We're talking the end of September. We need gift cards to give people because we're not going to be able to help them over the weekend. And we managed to get a grant of gift cards through the governor's office. We used $1,000 of them, and we gave $1,000 of them to Weld County, who was also suffering, because it's so important for them to be able to, people who are affected, to be able to walk out with something. And so find some community group or take it out of your own budget and get some gift cards to provide some immediate assistance to people. Be realistic about what you can do and help protect your staff from unrealistic expectations of what they can do. We're human services. We can do everything, right? Debrief internally to share lessons learned and prepare for the next one. Because if you haven't had them yet, someday you will, or your neighboring county will. So for the final slide, we actually had a great resource from 211 for our recent slide, and I put it up there. There's the link. And, or you can Google Colorado 211 Relief and Recovery Assistance Guide for the flood.
It's very good.
And that's it.
Yeah, I really like this. Yeah. And it's
We just want to remind folks on the phone that please put yourself on mute if you're having side conversations. Jenny, thank you so much. We do have a few questions that came through the chat feature through the webinar.
Okay.
So for El Paso and Larimer, what suggestions do you have for issuing EBT cards? What mistakes were made, or what preparation did you do that ended up being valuable?
This is Jenny. We had a major problem with EBT cards in Estes Park. And because in our disaster assistance center, we can get somebody there with the right phone line and connectivity to issue them right there. But what we couldn't do is we couldn't get to Estes. And the mail for a long time wasn't running to Estes. So our staff worked with community organizations, and as soon as the mail was available, we started issuing them down here and doing online chat for the face-to-face interview from Estes. And then we could mail the cards, and that's the best we can do because that is a big issue. We did call and see if we could issue checks, and we weren't able to do that because we had somebody up in Estes who could issue some checks for that amount, but EBT cards are a big problem.
This is Rick. You know, during Waldo Canyon, we were able to get connected 7 days a week, including the 4th of July. So we always had a staff person, an EBT person, able to issue those, because it was a big issue. Because, you know, even though Waldo Canyon was, again, the homes that were lost were people who probably had more means, the whole west side of Colorado Springs was blocked off, was shut down on evacuation. So we had lots of people who couldn't go to work. There's lots of you know, tech companies, call centers on this side of town. So we had 3 full-time techs taking applications on weekends and holidays. So it was really valuable between IT, our county IT, and I assume the state made it work for us.
So can you guys talk a little bit more about the process of setting up the emergency EBT card issuance and how that works?
This is Jenny. I'm not hands-on in that. You need a phone line, I believe, and a computer line. And if you have that, you could issue them anywhere.
Right, and the PLC, I think they're PLC machine, you know, the swipe card machines to activate the cards, and you have to have an interface with CBMS, I believe. I'm not real technical on this, but you know, clearly, I know the swipe card machines are, you know, closely monitored, and you know, they're like creating credit cards or cash debit cards. So again, I just think we needed the state's okay, and the staff that we have that work with that all the time understand the connectivity along with county IT. So I think it went pretty smooth. It wasn't a real complicated issue.
And then we have a couple of questions, Jenny, about your county diversion disaster assistance, and I know we have our state staff here is going to be talking about it, but there have been a few requests to receive a copy of your disaster diversion assistance policy.
This is Jenny. We can do that, but also I believe the state has it as part of our state plan, and maybe they can get it out for in their director listserv thing. But other counties have had them too, and I think isn't there a template for that?
Yeah, this is Daryl Madrid. We actually do have a template available for counties. That is actually a pretty good model for counties to use, and I believe Emily was saying we can send that out to all of the participants.
Yeah, so what we will do is we'll get those templates from Daryl. We'll send out this PowerPoint presentation once again to all of our participants, and any other requests that we get throughout, we can do a follow-up email with all of you.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Yes, couple more questions. How does the department obtain individual assistance FEMA designation? Is this something the county applies for using a paper application? Does the department apply online? How soon do you find out if you're approved and what the federal requirements are?
This is Jenny. Actually, it takes a presidential designation, disaster designation, to get that, and then the county doesn't have to apply. Depending on what designation you get, will depend on, you know, what the level of your disaster is in the presidential declaration. The state can help you apply for access to the FEMA database, but that all happens outside of any of us. And the state disaster management people and your county disaster management people should know.
Okay, great. And then one last question is, did you use social media to communicate from your office to the public? If so, which platforms? What lessons regarding communicating with the public would you share?
This is Ginny again. When you're in a, this is where it's not as easy to translate to a very small county, but in a large county, all of that communication has happened out of our Emergency Operations Center. And yes, they did use Facebook and Twitter and all of that to communicate. We also have a number that in the county that people can sign up to get disaster notifications. On your computer, you can get them either by phone or email. So all of our staff was connected into that because it would be the most recent information. So from our standpoint, we didn't handle or set up most of that.
Okay.
This is Rick. I just wanted to add on that at our Waldo Canyon especially, we actually asked people if they would provide us their email addresses. So we did create a distribution list. So if different resources became available, we actually had a group here that had somehow purchased or had created some nice artwork. Again, people had lost their homes, so they wanted to do an event actually to allow residents from Mountain Shadow to actually come and select a piece of artwork for their temporary apartments or whatever. So we had that distribution list as well.
Great, and we have a couple of other questions that have come in, but I think what we're going to do is move on to our next presenter, and I think that our subsequent presenters will have additional comments to share as well with their experience related to these other questions. So, Steve, did you join us?
Yes, finally. It was quite a chore.
Oh, no problem. We're just glad that you were able to hop on. So, Steve, if you'd like to take a few minutes to share your experience with the group.
Yeah, and ours was a little bit different in that, we had set up, we have a faith-based organization here, and we've got all of us participated in that with the first fire that we had here several years ago. And we kind of provided a support role. Our emergency government, emergency preparedness person here is really good and has really prepared the county to be ready for things. I think he has 1,000 to 5,000 beds available. And so in our plan as it's evolved, we kind of provide a support role to emergency preparedness. So when they need something, they call us to provide. They know what we do. And we leave word at the shelters. This last one, we had a very brief shelter with the Rio Grande fire because it affected more animals than people. But we would go over on whenever they needed some help. But we really play a support role to the emergency management group, and they kind of call us when they need things. As far as the traditional part, we were involved with, of course, we do long-term care here regionally, so we had to check with a lot of our long-term care people, particularly those with respiratory problems, to see if they were doing okay and line them up for where they could go, and also checking with the nursing home, because we had evacuated 2 nursing homes here, which the nursing homes got a hold of affiliate homes, and they were placed there, as well as the hospital placed several people, because it was kind of right over the hill. So that we had those, and so we had to locate some of our people that we had legal guardianship of, and I think we had 2 or 3, maybe 4 foster kids in the Black Forest area that we relocated. So that's kind of what we've had to do. We found that the community's been very responsive, and we played a support role whenever they needed. Again, with the Royal Gorge, many of those employees were either had just gone off food stamps, or and so we took care of that. But we were able pretty much to deal with it during the regular work hours when they needed some things done. So that's kind of been our support role, and our emergency management people really, along with the county commissioners, they really kind of take care of that, and the sheriff pretty well. So that's been kind of our experience here for the last 2 or 3 times.
Great. Thanks, Steve.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sure. Does anybody have any questions for Steve on the phone or over email or the chat?
think we will move on to Jody then. Jody, are you there?
I am.
Excellent.
If you want to just go a couple of slides ahead, I'll kind of hit on this. These guys have already, hit a lot of the points and stuff, but I think Rick really said it well. I mean, the weather patterns, when you have this stuff happening, is very interesting. The fire that morning that it broke out was 20, 25 miles away from us. And, you would never have anticipated it for it to grow or move as fast as it did. I think the unusual thing that we faced was the fire was never in Rio Grande County. But it doesn't mean that we weren't impacted. We actually had to open the evacuation site, and our evacuation site was not just people that had to move out of their homes, but we had probably 300 to 400 RVs that we had to figure out what to do because our mountains are loaded with campers this time of year. We were very, very fortunate. We did not lose any lives or structures. And then to have one other unusual thing, our county department for social services is not just for Rio Grande County, but we serve Mineral County. And so we were trying to figure out how to serve both counties at the same time. So that was a little unusual. If you want to go on to the next slide. Jenny was right. Track and document everything because that's stuff you're going to be asked later, and at the time you're not really thinking much about it, but it'll make your life a whole lot easier if you do that. The other thing is I was very, very fortunate. Our county had done tons of emergency planning, and we had meetings, and it was just a lot easier knowing what was expected ahead of time because you really don't have time to pull up the manual and figure it out. The other thing is resources are very different in different counties. One of the things I think that we found out was everybody's like, oh, you can partner with the Red Cross. Here in the San Luis Valley, we have 2 Red Cross individuals. That's it for the whole 6 counties, and they work regular jobs. So until they were able to dispatch individuals from across the country, I mean, our shelter manager was from Brooklyn, New York. And so it took almost a week to get the shelter fully established that we could step away from it. And so it defaulted back onto my county employees basically trying to run it. And then even when they got people here, we had interesting scenarios. They were from California. A lot of them ended up in the hospital themselves because they got altitude sickness. So it's one of those things you just really depend a lot on your staff. I think Jenny was right. You got to know what they're going to go through, and they need to know what they may be expected to be asked to do, especially in small rural communities. But I have to say my staff did an amazing job, and they did really well with an interesting scenario that none of us expected. If you want to go to the next slide. Communication, one of the questions that somebody asked with social media, I can tell you that once, and it didn't come from the counties. Our county department didn't do it. Our counties tried to blog, but even when the federal government took over the fires, we were not getting good information. But they set up a Facebook page. They sent out tweets. They were doing all of the different social medias, and I can tell you it really mitigated a lot of the rumors that were occurring. At one point, we had heard a whole town had burned down. We were having rumors of where the shelters were at. People were trying to open them everywhere. So communication is a must, and I think if you can utilize the social media, you can get a lot of it out and, put a damper on some of the rumors that are occurring. I kind of covered, if you want to go to the next slide, about the Red Cross shelter. We went over that part of it. So if you want to go to the next one. In addition, I have a really small staff. So when we were trying to man the shelter basically and keep our office open, we also had to move into the recovery center mode. And we're so very fortunate and thankful to the other counties. We did borrow stuff from El Paso County on the forums, and the staff in El Paso County actually walked my staff through some of the things and the processes. So, I guess it's one of the things to be very thankful. I'm very thankful we could ask and rely on our neighboring counties for help and stuff, but it does take a little bit of a challenge figuring out how to meet all the requirements. Next slide. You need to make sure you have a good county emergency plan. If your county does not have one, you need to figure, where it is and try and get it. And then Jenny went over this about getting a disaster assistance policy, and also, if the governor or even if the president declares the disasters. And then I just threw in the last slide is the long-term impact. We are very, very fortunate. We did use our TANF reserves for emergency funding. El Tamara stepped in and filled in the gaps instead of the gift card idea. they were allowing us to give some money to individuals. However, but what we really found, and we're still facing around here, is the long-term impact to businesses. Businesses were not eligible, nor could we find any resources that were really able to help them to stabilize them. And so that's something that I'm hoping maybe in the long term we can look at or find a way maybe to help, because it's going to have a long-lasting impact, not just in our counties, but I think all the counties impacted. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Jody. So, Steve, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on the social media utilization for communication in Fremont County?
That was all handled by emergency management. I know we had press conferences, and there were some postings on the county website, and I think the city website took the lead. But that's about all I know.
Okay. So we have a few other questions that have come through for our county partners. Did you use ICS training, the Incident Command System training?
This is Jenny. The Incident Command is handled by the sheriff, and so we did not do any training on that.
Same in El Paso. The sheriff's office managed that.
Jody?
We actually did, because we're such a small county. We did it in partnership with our sheriff's office.
Great. Steve?
Sheriff's Department handled that for us.
Okay. And did the counties use the ESF system, and how did that work for you in the EOC?
Can you explain what system was that? This is Rick.
The emergency support function, and the EOC is the Emergency Operations Center.
Right. And again, in El Paso, we had a disaster assistance center, but we had a joint incident command with the Forest Service, the Sheriff's Office, and then an emergency operations center also operated by the Sheriff's Office. So the Sheriff's Office in El Paso had managed that.
This is Jenny. I think the ESF is the Disaster Assistance Center with multiple agencies there.
Okay, well.
This is Jody. The ESF 6, if that's what they're talking about, Jenny is correct. That is the plan that, most emergency plans, what they reference, the number. And so it does work in partnership with your emergency command center or whatever, but it's just the protocol of who handled what and how they do. And each county writes their ESF 6 a little bit different.
Thank you. One other question was related to child care providers and what type of services and supports were provided to those organizations in your counties during the emergencies.
This is Jenny. When we had the fire, the High Park fire, child care providers were also involved in our efforts to try to figure out who was at risk from the smoke damage. A lot of the parents kept their kids home, and we did have one child care provider up in the mountains that was evacuated and had to make sure that they didn't have any kids with them. But like the rest of the community, we were looking for at-risk people.
Okay. So that's it for all the questions that we've received through chat. So now we will move over to the CDHS point of view to emergency response. First up, we have Daryl Madrid, again with the Office of Economic Security and the Division of Colorado Works.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to primarily talk about the county disaster emergency policy. I think it's so important that counties be proactive in formulating one of those. I think Jenny brought it up as one of the lessons learned. We've been encouraging counties to formulate one for a few years now and have provided the necessary tools, I believe, to help them in doing so. We most recently, during the floods, have provided that template. But we'll provide that again today or soon. a lot of the counties do not still have a policy in place. They may have a diversion policy, a regular county diversion policy, but I think a separate emergency disaster policy would be beneficial. There's certain clauses, some counties have clauses in their county diversion policy that it would allow for emergency assistance, but I think it's best to go ahead and formulate a policy that would allow you to set further criteria related to disasters. Boulder, Larimer, El Paso, they all have good policies. We've heard from Rick and Jenny about the recent wildfires, and they have good policies in place, and I would encourage them to share those with other counties. And El Paso even took it one step further, and maybe Rick can confirm this. They developed an assessment tool for the on-site disaster assistance centers. They called it during the Waldo Canyon the Recovery Center Diversion Assessment Guideline Tool. That basically was handed to families that were victimized, and essentially streamlined the process of the eligibility process, made things easier. So we encourage counties to look at things a little differently like that too. What the disaster policy essentially does is it does allow us to waive certain eligibility requirements. So our program rules already allow for flexibility within your county diversion policy. This really takes it a step further and allows you to waive certain requirements. Verification is one of those. We know that families that are impacted either lose or damage documents, it's been mentioned today, or due to evacuation have to leave their home abruptly. So they're unable to actually provide the verification documents. The county policy would allow that to happen. You can set your benefit limits and also create a table to allow counties to set lifetime limits as well. We do, on the benefit limits, we encourage counties to set high limits due to the fact that it is county diversion is discretionary. So there's flexibility there, so why not set it at a high limit, and that gives you the ability to exercise your judgment and assess those families appropriately and issue benefits accordingly. Some of the system guidance that we've given is we've created, I think maybe 2 years ago, we created a Colorado Works emergency procedure document. And basically what that is a step-by-step CBMS document on how to actually data enter Colorado Works cases for disaster assistance. I could also make that available. We can send the template along with the procedure. It's basically a desk aid that is very helpful. So it may need a little updating. I'll look at that again, but we will get that out to you, anybody, all interested parties. Various other desk aids have been formulated too that we can gather and send out for you. Some of you may be familiar with an HLBR. What that is a high-level business process document that is issued that essentially aligns system with county policy. So it ensures that the proper logic is put into CBMS that would align it with county policy. So some of those things I mentioned earlier, waiving verification requirements, benefit limits, maximum lifetime limits, those are all set within this document. Those are all identified in this document that will allow CBMS to act according to county policy, what is in your county policy. That's really basically it in a nutshell as far as policy and system guidance that we've been involved in. Some of the typical types of assistance that we help with involves on-site assistance as well. We had recent staff go out to counties and help families navigate resources and just navigate the system in general, particularly those that aren't used to walking through our doors. We processed cases, help process cases. We ensure system access controls are in place, help with priority 1 tickets, prepare program briefs, and field telephone calls. So I wanted to give my the address to our Colorado Works Issues Policy Box. If you have any additional questions after this webinar, if you have any follow-up questions or just need assistance or need documentation, feel free to give us email our box, and that's CDHS _coworks, that's COWORKS _issues at state.co.us. And thank you for your time.
So we have one question that came through, and it is asking for clarification around verification requirements that could be waived by simply stating that an emergency county diversion plan is in place. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so as I said, these families that are victimized may not have that proper verification, and Jenny and Rick may be able, and Joey may be able to speak upon this too, at the front line perspective. But yes, we will allow for a client statement or collateral contact in an emergency situation when it's been declared an emergency situation by the governor, and it's included in a county policy. We will allow a client statement as the verification source. So that is an acceptable verification source during these situations. Of course, your county policy would have to be approved by your Board of County Commissioners. And you know, our program, I want to stress that our program does have, it's a glorious program because of the fact that there are areas of discretion, and we do have flexibility in certain areas, but one area we do not have flexibility in is not having a proper policy in place. One would have to be approved by your board of directors in order for these things to take place.
Great. Do we have any other questions for Daryl? All right, then we will move on to Amanda Dyer. She is also with the Colorado Department of Human Services Office of Economic Security. Amanda is with our Division of Food Assistance.
Hello, everyone. So I kind of wanted to go over today some of the services the Food Assistance Program can offer in a disaster. And I guess the first service that the Food Assistance Program offers is what's called replacement benefits. And replacement benefits are part of the regular Food Assistance Program. And anytime a disaster or household misfortune occurs, if a family's food was destroyed in the disaster and that food was purchased as food assistance, we can issue a replacement allotment for the amount of food that was destroyed. And this can happen without any special permission from USDA, and it can happen without having a presidential declaration of disaster. So we recommend that that is your first line of defense and go-to when a disaster happens. And anytime a disaster does happen, please feel free to reach out to us. We have technical guidance documents on how to issue replacement benefits and some of the policies surrounding that. The other thing that we can offer in certain instances is what's known as disaster food assistance. But in order to have a disaster program, the president does have to declare a disaster. And as mentioned earlier, it has to be a declaration made for individual assistance. So once that declaration is made, we work with the county to determine if operating disaster food assistance makes sense in this case. And really, it's really up to the county to make that decision. Disaster food assistance is different than the regular food assistance program, and we have to, it can only be run once we submit a plan to USDA FNS and the plan is approved. So we work with the county on developing the plan. There is a little bit of detail that is required to go into the plan, such as the location of the disaster site, the hours that you will be accepting the SNAP applications, and we even have to go into detail about how you will be issuing EBT cards, what's your plan for communicating to the county that you're going to be operating DSNAP. And so there's a very fine balance between jumping in too soon and, having enough time to plan everything. And so FNS is usually pretty cautious in making sure everything is ready to be up and running before we start DSNAP. And so the EBT office works with the county to troubleshoot any EBT issues, how will cards be issued, what technology is needed. And the food assistance policy team will train county staff on the policy, the different verification requirements, as well as how to do issue benefits in the automated system. There are some differences in the automated system, and so we work with Deloitte to make sure that coding is in place and ready to go on the first day that DSNAP applications can be accepted. Just to highlight some differences between the regular food assistance program and disaster benefits. The disaster program uses a different application. The county can only accept applications for a time period of no more than 7 days. The county can choose how many days that they want to give people the chance to apply, but it can't be any longer than 7 days. And the real target audience for DSNAP are those individuals not currently receiving SNAP benefits, but their income and resources during the disaster period must continue to meet specific income limits. We also look at disaster-related expenses that the household paid out of pocket during this time period when determining if they are eligible. And households who are determined eligible will receive a 1 month maximum SNAP allotment based on their household size. So it's only 1 month worth of benefits. The income limits are a little bit higher and the verification requirements are relaxed a little bit. So those are the two primary services that can be offered through the food assistance program. And as always, we're here for any technical assistance to provide. We're here to help you discuss whether DSNAP makes sense if that declaration is made, and we work very closely with the county in establishing that plan and communicating that with our federal partners with a very short turnaround time. And I think that's really all I had to say today, so I'm open to any questions that anyone may have.
Do we have any questions for Amanda? All right, we will turn the floor over to Susan Beckman. She is our director for the Office of Administrative Solutions, and many of you may know her from her previous life as an Arapahoe County Commissioner. Susan is now also in charge of emergency preparedness for the departments, and she joined the team within the last couple of months. So, Susan?
Thank you, Christina.
I'm sorry. We had one question that came through. For disaster SNAP, do you have to track that separately, Amanda?
Yes, you do have to track that. And as part of the disaster program, we have to report to FNS, our federal partners, daily about the number of applications accepted and processed. And there is different coding in the system that identifies those cases for us. So the county does have to track daily all of their work associated with the applications.
Thanks, Amanda.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm kind of the walk-on guest today. I'm so glad that I was invited to hear about everything you're doing, and congratulations, you guys are doing a great job in counties. What I didn't realize as a county commissioner moving to the state is that the state has 300 of their own buildings, that 84% of them are 24/7, and so we do have a lot of nursing home facilities, mental health facilities, group homes, regional centers, and we were very fortunate as an organization not to have many of them in the areas most impacted by the floods. In fact, a lot of our buildings are very old and they had leaky roofs and water damage, but we were very, very fortunate. As you know, a lot of our staff was out doing various things in support of the counties as the disaster declaration grew from 14 to 17 and then to 24 from DSNAP to, we did a lot of waivers for child care facilities. There were about 13 of them that were businesses or homes that were destroyed or significantly damaged, and we gave waivers for bottled water and porta potties and things like that. We did have a lot of staff out in the field, and we're trying to be as supportive as possible to counties. My understanding is the communication, and probably because of the size and scale of the floods through the Front Range, is that our communication around this disaster was very dispersed, that we had, instead of, as we had done in the Waldo Canyon fires, for this disaster, there was a lot more staff discussion and questions and direction. And I would really like to hear feedback, since I'm currently in the process of trying to fill the emergency management function. We don't have anyone right now as an emergency manager, but just to try to format how we can best communicate with our counties during this type of disaster. Is it everything's good? It doesn't need to be more centralized. Do the county liaisons work best? Rick, you might want to talk a little bit about what was happening in Waldo Canyon and the Colorado Springs fires, and to just research that a little bit more. I will tell you that the department as a whole is going to do some more training around emergency management through the National Incident Management Systems, which usually your sheriffs and local counties and county commissioners and departments do a lot of training around that system to just work a little bit more on preparedness, communication, information management, resource management, command and management, and just the ongoing of working with staff and counties and other organizations and nonprofits. So hopefully in the future, as we do some additional training, we will be able to bring in counties to help train with us, because I think that's really important to prepare for disasters, to look at best practices so that the next time around you can do things better. So I do want to know how you prepare your communication, and also our website. We're updating our website, and I know when I was on the other side as a county commissioner, it was very difficult to find contact numbers. And would a list of directors and division directors and numbers of facilities, would that help you out, and would you like us to send that to you? So I'll take any questions, but I really enjoyed hearing about what you all have been doing to deal with the disaster and to help those that were impacted by it.
This is Greg, Susan. I just want to say, from Waldo Canyon through this year, I've always felt very supported. I mean, Dee Martinez reached out last year, and again, the one big issue was able to access CBMS and get benefits on those weekends. So, and this year, Christina and I know Reggie visited us this year. So, again, I just think if we need help, and you all have reached out, we'll contact you. Some of it's very technical, I suppose, and it's program specific, but I'm sure you can get us to the right people. So I felt very supported.
Very good.
This is Jenny. I also felt very supported, and I think if we could concentrate the communication through the county liaisons, most of my information I got on email, and the best information I got through the county liaison. So they can always get us to the right person if they're not the right person.
Great. That is great feedback.
This is Steve Clifton, and I have to concur with Janie. I think that was a very good way to do it. And again, Christina and Reggie came down, met with the commissioners and myself, and we gave them an update. So I think it went pretty well that way. I think the other director information you want to send out would be helpful, seeing there's been so many changes. So I think all that would be fine, and I think if we continue down the road we have with the liaison people, and do some refinements if we need them. Obviously, if we have too many things going at once, you only have 2 individuals there. They might need a little help. But I think it worked very well.
Okay, great. And we just got a question about just someone saying that it'd be great to have emergency numbers and email addresses, and it's important to keep them up to date. And we'll work with the county liaisons to make sure that we do that, because I do think that's important. Sometimes you need to talk to a program person, but I'm glad to hear the positive feedback about the liaisons.
And just to follow up on that, I know that our communications department is working on a new approach of tracking staff changes. But just as a reminder, that's why Emily and I are here, is so that you don't have to worry about, sifting through a 40-page spreadsheet trying to find the right person. We can help make those connections for you. And it's a lot easier to remember 2 names and phone numbers and email addresses than it is hundreds. As you know, our department is pretty large. So Emily and I just kind of wanted to share our thoughts as well. I came on in January with the department. Emily came on at the end of June. And I was here for both the fires earlier this summer as well as the flooding later this year. I took the lead with the fires, and Emily took the lead with the flooding. But both of us were doing outreach to counties across the state. I know that we had different approaches from the fires to the flooding, whereas with the fires, I was doing most of the outreach to our directors. With the flooding, I know we had more office staff and program staff involved in those contacts. And so I think what we're hearing for those that have vocalized their opinion is that it seems to be better and more efficient for our county partners if they are hearing from one group of folks versus hearing from all of our different 7 or 8 offices and multiple divisions under each office.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And I just want to say we are definitely open to feedback. I think, we want to make sure that this works for you and that we are supporting you as best as we can as a department. So if you want to shoot us emails offline or anything like that, or for those of you who have not had the disaster experience, if there's something that you need help with in terms of who to talk to about, like what Daryl or Amanda talked to, or if there's any child care questions or anything like that, we'd be happy to connect you.
And we really wanted to take this opportunity to ensure that all of our counties are as prepared as possible. We never know when a disaster might occur in our community or what it's even going to look like. And so, we want to give you all the tools that you need now to be as prepared as you can moving forward. And clearly, there is a great network between counties, and how we heard evidenced today by our speakers of how you help each other out, not only emotionally, but also financially and staffing-wise. We know Boulder County has been receiving quite an amount of support as well from counties across the state. I did want to mention that we also have a county liaison from Healthcare Policy and Financing here in the room today. We have been working pretty well, our 2 departments, in communicating. So Mike, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add or share with the group?
No, just like Christine and Emily had said, if there's anything we can do to help, please feel free to reach out to us as you have been.
So are there any final questions? If not, again, thank you for your participation, and we will be working with our team here to get out those templates to you, and we'll work with our county presenters to see if they're willing to share any of their templates, and then moving forward we can help you in any way that you see fit. So thanks again, and as always, feel free to reach out to Emily or me with any questions. Have a great afternoon, all.
Yes, thanks for being patient with the technical issues.
Thank you.